hopefully we're going live. Hello, people of Facebook and YouTube as well. I'm going to start posting these things on YouTube. I'm a minute or so early, so hopefully in that time I'm just going to set myself up and I'll see this so I can follow any comments if anyone's got any questions or things that maybe we can look at over the next couple of weeks. Then please just put whatever you need to ask. If there's anything that you feel I can help with, put it in the comments and we can work on them. Okay, just see what we have. Okay, Facebook has changed in the last week as well. So, amazing, here I am. So hopefully I can see if I can see the comments as they come up live rather than on the screen in front of me. So, hi everyone, hope you've had a great week. Hope you're enjoying the sunshine, wherever you are. Apologies if there's a mix up with the hour. I think I may have put Central European time, which I believe is an hour out. So I'll fix that for next week's. At 7:30 in Blighty. I'm in Liverpool, as you can tell from my cup. So I'm back at home. I've got a lot of questions to go through this week, which is great. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for sending all these questions through, and they're really good. Really diverse range of topics to look at. So I'm hoping to fly through as many of these as I can. I'll try and keep these things as sort of succinct as possible, because any one of these questions could probably be the topic for the whole hour. So I'm hopefully going to give you just some actual specific things that you might want to try, rather than going into every single possibility of a particular technique. Maybe as this becomes a regular thing, then I'm saying what generally happens is topics tend to recur, they recur. So that way I'll come at it with a fresh perspective each time. And that's kind of like the way I practice, actually. If you look at any particular topic, so the first thing we're going to look at today is walking bass. There's as many different ways to approach that as there are players that use that concept. So the reason why maybe I've got, a modest collection of things that I might do when I'm approaching that particular concept is because I've practiced it dozens of times from different perspectives. And one time I was trying to figure out what Joe Pass was up to, then maybe trying to work out, what makes Martin Taylor's bass lines tick, and what about actual bass players themselves, So with this in mind, over a period of time, that's where the breadth comes from. I think it comes from attacking things from different angles, if that makes sense. So I'll start with that then. So Symphorian. Oh, in fact, Symphorian asked another question. John, it was John who asked the question about walking bass lines. Sorry. So a couple of things about walking bass lines, and some of these things I'm going to reiterate what I learned from watching people like Joe Pass, that great solo, I think it's just called Solo Jazz Guitar DVD by Joe Pass. You can buy it for on DVD for a tenner, and it's possibly the best £10 you may ever spend. I watched it when I was about 20 probably, and it was on a video, and I still have it somewhere, although I don't have a video player. And I watched it again 20 some years later and realised that most of the things that he does in that video have definitely made an impact in the way that I play now. Like the chord voicings that he uses, they're all still there, and the techniques that he employs, and even just down to like his question of priority. So i.e. when you're playing walking bass lines, so this is the kind of thing we're talking about. If I take just a simple, I don't know, like a blues, I might go that type of stuff. So where there's a bass line punctuated with chords, kind of approach. So the most important thing is the bass line. To the extent that even if the chords disappeared, so if I'll simplify it and play this just around a simple blues. Maybe I'll put it in G because then we can utilize some open strings as well. It doesn't need to be super complicated. You don't need to play massive chords. You don't really need to play chords on every change even. The bass line is the important thing. So something that might get you going is, say we just say G7 is our harmony. So the bass line might just be like a 4 and a bar thing. So that means you're going to play on every beat. Generally speaking, and of course, you know, for me to say bass lines have 2 variations is ridiculous. There's millions of different ways of doing this. But a really solid start here is to go between playing 2 notes in a bar, so on beats 1 and 3, and then developing that so that you can go between playing 2 to playing 4, and that's where things start to walk really. Generally speaking, when you hear things that are 2 in a bar, it usually goes between like maybe the root and the 5th of the chord, something like that. So if I played a 2, 5, 1 in C, 2 in a bar, I might go, then maybe an A, and then I played maybe 3. So even from that, that's an interesting kind of thing that you could work on, just by taking 2 in a bar and then playing, just dropping chords. At different points in the bar. A particular thing that I've been adding into my playing of late, the idea came from Jonathan Kreisberg, is to keep the bass line going on 1 and 3, and then maybe you can add some passing tones which relate to where we're going to rather than where we've been. So that this A flat here, it's not really got anything to do with the D, it's to do with the fact that we're moving to the G. And then over the top of that you can play different rhythmic groupings, so you could do some like so that's a group of 3. It's going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Going across the bar line. I can do a 5. And then every 5th chord, that's when it's going to land. Or 7. So that's going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And there, boom, it lands in time. So that's kind of an interesting thing, which is maybe more to do with the placement of the chords than the bass line. So again, just to recap, what I'm doing there is taking a simple bass line, and sometimes I'm sidestepping into the next chord, depending upon when the pattern of 3, 5, or 7 repeats. So it's kind of a tricky one, this, but you know, for more advanced players, this could be something that you might want to attempt. So just to do that one more time, and sometimes as well, I'm doing like a quick change 2, 5, 1. You should be able to do it with both. I'm just moving through this quickly. So if I do a group of 3, I'll just do it on 1 chord for the moment. So the bass line is going to do this. That's just 1 chord, and the bass line is going to go. You'll find that in every kind of multiple of 3, every 3 beats, every 3 bars, every 3 whatever, that's when things are going to land back on the 1. A 5, it's a 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Although again, there's no reason why it couldn't be the other way around, so that's boom, that's where it lands together. But of course, at that point where it's landing together, it's landing on the 5th of the chord, so even that feels displaced. So it really takes a second run of 5 before you feel like yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Boom. So what I'm doing now is putting that through a 2, 5, 1. and then so the changes are staying in the right place. Although sometimes I'm using like alternate bass notes, like there for G7 there was an A flat, flat 9 in there. We're trying to get to the stage where I could do this kind of on the fly through a whole tune, perhaps. I mean, of course, doing a whole group of 3 for the whole tune is going to be, you know, it's overstating the point. But it's something that's nice to drop into. This thing about like different rhythmic groupings. But okay, so that's maybe something that you might want to try with the 2 in the bar thing. The 4 in the bar thing. Usually, what happens is, well, there's a variety of different approaches for how you create the bass lines. I suggest for this, check out, you know, there's some amazing books. There's Ed Friedland, the 2 walking bass books. They're really great, and maybe guitar players don't look at them because, you know, it doesn't necessarily relate directly to their instrument. But there's nobody going to play a better walking bass line than a bass player. So maybe look at what they say, you know, and really it boils down to like maybe 3 or 4 different things. It's arpeggios. So then we'll G to C. It's scales, and it's chromaticism. Sort of combining those things together. But generally, what happens is, for the most part, the first part of each bar is concerned with where you are, but then there's a tipping point somewhere around B3 going to B4, where we turn our attention to what's coming next. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, right, that D flat there has got nothing to do with the G. That relates to the fact that we're going to a C. So it's a connection device to make the journey to where we're going more interesting. But before we get to that, maybe let's look at just on one chord. So I'm going to play just the G13, and the bass line is going to be. Of course, then I can play chords. On top. Now, there's a choice there as to whether the chord gets dragged with the bass or whether the chord stays where it is. So, for example, what I did, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at one point I played G13 and I played G13 twice. So I just stayed on the G, so you never hear a different chord other than G stuff. But I could, as the bass line moves, at one point went to an F, I could go. And then imagine that there's an F in there, or an F sharp. So as a passing chord, or even going above to an A flat. So the chords can either follow where the bass is at that particular point, and that creates like a sense of tension and release, or it can stay where it is. But my advice to you is, the most tricky thing about a lot of these walking bass lines is to try and establish 2 feels. You don't want it to sound like a bad bass player and a bad guitar player, or a bad keyboard player. So the bass is generally long. Bass players generally play long in jazz. And rhythm players generally play staccato, you know, with occasional held chords, but a lot of the time, to create the bounce to the feel, the chords will be clipped short. So what we've got to try to do is get long and that's often what happens is when you try and do the 2 together, they are both end up short, which is not what we want. That kind of thing. Now, I would advise for this that if you can play the bass line finger style with a naked flesh of the thumb, it's going to sound more like a bass player. Generally speaking, the pick is a bit clicky. It can be a little bit on the clicky side. Which sometimes it has to happen. Like if you're trading, I find if I'm playing the blues, I'm going. imagining I was trading with another guitar player, say. So I'm playing 4 bars of walking bass there, and then playing some like licks in between. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to get rid of the pick in that short space of time is it's not easy. It's not easy to do. For me, it's practically impossible. So I have 2 choices there. Choice 1 is to do like what Martin Taylor would do, which is solo with his fingers, and he's really, really great at doing that. You know, like he can play with equal, it seems, level of fluency, whether he's playing with a flat pick or if he's just playing with his fingers. And I noticed there's a real in my own playing. There's a real difference, and I can play with fingers, and sometimes I will do it, but there's a level of dynamics and attack that I get with pick that I just can't match with the fingers. So in that instance, it's a compromise, and you know, necessity being the mother of invention. I just try and make the bass line not that clicky if I can. You know, try and de-emphasize the pick attack. And certainly if you're doing something like bossa nova playing, you don't want the pick for the bass line, I would say. So if you can, you need to either find a way of ditching the pick, some sort of sleight of hand thing. So if you've got like a little bit longer to change, then sure, you could do it. So if it's a slower tempo, to the next chorus or whatever, then you might have time to change then. If not, you know, we have to try and find a way of making it sound smooth with the plectrum, and it's not impossible, but it's maybe not desirable. So what I suggest you do with this is you take really, really smoothly connected chord changes. If the chord shapes are too big or too busy, you're never going to get a chance to get them in. So one way of looking at this, a really solid way, is to just use a consistent finger for the bass line. So you could imagine, say I say G7 like so, with the second finger playing the bass. Now that's helpful, of course, because it's the longest finger and it's in the middle of the hand. So G7, and then say C7, and again, it's the second finger could be playing the bass, and then G7 to D7, so you could go. Just using these 2-note chords, and the chords are not moving at all, they're hardly moving. And Joe Pass would do things like that, but he'd expand upon it, maybe play a 3-note chord, G13, and then say we were playing a 1-6-2-5, he might go G13, E7 sharp 9, A13, D7 sharp 9. And if we look what's actually happening here, chord is the same form for all. And it really suits the idea of the connection between, like say if you're going to play a motif like, you know, rather than all the chords being coming from different configurations of intervals, which doesn't sort of, it's not cohesive, it doesn't really make sense. Also makes it a lot easier to play. So look for these small chord voicings. Roots 3rd 7ths are a good place to begin. You could even do fingerings. I know Martin does a fingering like this, which is the 1st, the 2nd and 4th. And the reason why he does it is it allows him to do that for C7. So, and we see a lot of these like diagonal lines going on in bass lines as well, tritone subs. So that, all of that was just 2 forms, G, 7, C7. Okay. So I'm hoping that I know this is brief, it's kind of a whistle-stop tour of walking bass, but I'm hoping it might give you some insight. So the other thing I was going to mention with walking bass that brings this stuff to life is all the little clicks, the incidental, like extraneous noises that you hear. Bass players, generally speaking, don't play. They'll go. These little kaboom, boom, boom, kaboom, boom. So it could either be an open string or another string above, like a grace note thing Joe had. This little triplet thing, you know. And sparingly, if you add these, instead of it being real straight, there's a little passing grace note there which brings it to life. There's also become kind of a popular thing of late of the backbeat, where it's the bass line where it beats 2 and 4. That kind of thing. Slapping the thumb on the guitar. You want to check out Tuck Andrus for that kind of stuff, it's really incredible. So yeah, so some tips: hopefully keep the bass notes long, keep the chords short, so rhythms like, so you could go notice there the chord followed, I went to the F. So the chord actually followed where the bass line was, rather than sticking rigidly to the harmony in terms of if you were just going to be comping on one chord, you consider that to be a G7. But we can always use the F as a passing chord also. So hopefully that's some food for thought there with the bass lines. I'm going to move on just quickly to a question Symphorian raised about. We were talking last time about these things: 2, 5, 1, and we were like traditional jazz lines, you know, the kind of things that you might hear, you know, Charlie Parker play. You know, there's things moving in minor thirds and major thirds. That kind of stuff, yeah. And then seeing this chord as being not being an E minor chord with a flat 5, but seeing it as being like a G minor, and then this is B flat, and then it's being D minor. Well, Symphorian's question was about, okay, how might modern players like Lage, Lund or someone like him, how might he approach playing over a 2-5-1? And again, you know, to try and condense Lage Lund's playing approach into 15 minutes is not easy. So I'll just give you one thing that he does. Okay, and so this breaks into 2 or 3 different ideas. But the first one is to get as much mileage as you possibly can from anything that you know. So this isn't a Lage Lund voicing, but we all know this. We all know this is an A, right? But it illustrates the concept. So I find that that's an A major over A, and we know what that functions as. Then I move that up a fret, and it becomes a B flat over A. And how does that function? Well, that's as a B flat major 7 now. Or you could see it as being some kind of suspended chord, like it's got a flat 6, a flat 9, and a sus 4, so it might work in a Phrygian type, you know. In that kind of scenario. So figure out what the intervals are and what would its function be, and then we make it into a B over an A. And we say, okay, what's this now? And we can say, well, it's a B7 with the A in the bass, you know, and of course you could play B7 IDs. Or we could see it as being, it's got a 6, it's got a 9, it's got a sharp 11. So now that we're talking Lydian, that's what we're talking at that point, yeah. that type of sound. And then we move it up semitone again, and we've got A minor 7. C over A is A minor 7. And then another semitone again. Let's go, so what that is. And we have a major 7, major 3rd, and a raise 5. Really beautiful sound in major 7 sharp 5 chord. We'll get back to that one in a moment. Then you move it up, got semitone again, and we get a second inversion D chord. And then semitone again. What is that? You know, some kind of altered chord. That type of sound that would work over here as a 5 chord in a 2-5-1. And you hear modern players doing things like that kind of sound. So I might go E minor 11, A altered, D major. So by moving this to every location and all 12 work, you know, you can find it a function. You see that this chord isn't just A, it's not just a major chord, it could be a minor chord, it could be a dominant chord like a sus, it could be an altered dominant chord, it could be a major 7 sharp 5, it could be a Lydian chord, it could be anything you want it to be. So what Lage does is he takes this with other chord forms. One that he likes to use to demonstrate this is the major 9 shape that we know and love. But what's interesting about this chord, which we'll develop in a moment, is it doesn't contain every note. It's a 4-note chord, 4-note voicing, and he takes it through the various permutations. But you know, maybe this is his thing, so I'll leave that to him to describe as well. But it doesn't contain a 5th, and that's why the inversions are so broken up, because when we invert, we miss the 5th out, so you get big gaps in the chord. But we have a root, a major 3rd, a major 7, and a 9. So there's no 5. So this gives us the potential that this could also be this chord. It could belong to major 7 sharp 5, if you wanted it to. Okay. So by placing it against different roots, you can find that it could work as a major chord. So if it's and put it against E, it could be E major 9, or this could be E major as well. Or it could be E7. If I play it from the 7th, the intervals all rack up for an E like 11 type sound. If I play it from the major 3rd, what I get is the major 3rd, the raise 5, the sharp 9, and the flat 9. It's kind of an unusual one. Sorry, and the flat 5, forgive me. Yeah, that's right. So, and for half diminished chords, you could play it from the flat 5. Right. What happens when we look at those intervals? They correspond in intervals for those chords. Now, there's another way of seeing this major from the flat 5 in that. Okay, so last time we said E half diminished was really G minor, but the relative major of G minor is B flat. So this is one of the reasons why this B flat major can be used against. In fact, there's an inversion of our half diminished chord, and there's the B flat major. It's the same sound. So Lage's 2-5-1 could be this. For the E, half diminished, he'd play like a B flat, major 9. For the A7, he plays a D flat or C sharp. I guess you'd be C sharp and a major 3rd, C sharp major 9. And for the finishing D minor, he plays F major 9, like George Benson, you know, F. So those sounds juxtaposed against one another. So for the half diminished, you have B flat major 7. For the A7 altered, you have that interesting C sharp major 9 voicing. So what we get, as I said a second ago, we get the major 3rd, raise 5, raise 9, flat 5. So it's got 2 5s. You know. And then for the D minor, we play an F. Okay. So his 2-5-1 will be 2, 5, 1. 2-5-1. And then you can of course play phrases around that. Now, my kind of reinterpretation of this is, okay, there's no 5 present in that chord, but if I reintroduce the 5, but I introduce it as a raised 5, I get this beautiful sound. So instead of playing B flat major 9, if I play B flat major 7 sharp 5, it brings in the natural second of that E chord. That type of sound. And then again, same thing here. If I play this as a, perfect for A altered. And in fact, you get all these beautiful voicings where you can take the kind of the associated arpeggio that goes with that and break it into 3 notes. And you can do it with all of them. And then the same thing again for F. If you play F major 7 sharp 5, you get the minor major sound. That type of sound. Now, if you just take this particular one. So there's an arpeggio, of course, that goes with that chord. The arpeggio, in this case, I use this fingering. And that's F major 7 sharp 5, but played against D. And one of the things you can do to create motion with any arpeggio, so again, this is another topic, but it relates to this Lage Lund thing, is instead of playing this as a straight arpeggio, is you can break it into two note voicings. Sorry, forgive me, that would be right. One more time. So what I'm doing here is taking the arpeggio and playing, instead of playing each note separately, I'm playing the 5th and 3rd string together, again 5th and 3rd string together, then I'm going to jump to the 4th and 2nd, and then the 3rd and 1st, and then again 3rd and 1st, and then 2nd and 1st. That's what we're stuck with there. We can't play, we haven't got that string jump. So you can do that with each of these voicings to create movement within a chord. So when you play a chord, maybe I play a simpler chord, I'll just play D major 7 to begin with. So if you play that chord, instead of just going boom, that's it, that's all we've got, we can break it up to create 2 note voicings. Or we can fill in the arpeggio that goes with that and create lines. Maybe that might be something to explore, this concept of when you play a chord, not necessarily playing each and every note. And then of course when you take these things, you've got inversions of them and you can move them around to create like partial sets of intervals which can be used within lines. And I use these things when I'm playing single note lines as a kind of a form of polyphony. And you hear that kind of stuff in Lage Lund's playing as well. So I'd urge you to explore some of his education material. He's mind-blowingly good. And that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of just something that he does over things like 2/5s. So the concept, just to reiterate, is to take any event, and in this case it's this chord, but you could just as easily do with the chord shape that I used, which is this one, with sharp 5. And then figure out what does that do against each of the 12 roots. And then what you'll end up with then is a set of options. So over a half diminished chord, I've now learned that I can play a major 7 or flat 5 away. So that's something that I can do. And then over a dominant 7 chord, you can play this major 9 voicing with no 5, right, just because it's got no 5, off the major 3rd. But if you include the 5, I'd suggest you include the raised 5. And again, so instead of playing in this altered form, that arpeggio that I played a second ago in double stops. So there's a lot of stuff there. I'm aware of the fact that's quite theory heavy, so the next thing will be easier, I promise. Yeah, apologies if this is mind bending, but you know, Symphorian did ask, and there isn't really an easy Lage Lund solution of a 2/5 to be fair. Yeah, so that's what you get, you know, when you look at players of that kind of level of complexity and and sort of intelligence, if you like. You know, he's a very cerebral player, but you know, he swings as well, you know. But, so okay, I'm going to show you something that's maybe a little bit easier now. Andy asked the question about sidestepping, what that is, what sidestepping is. So what this is all about is taking a phrase and moving little bits of the phrase, right? Now, there's obvious ways of sidestepping, moving in and out by semitone. Some of them sound good and some of them sound corny. The corny versions are the ones where you just take the same idea. So say you've got that over A minor, and I go, that can kind of sound a little bit obvious, shall we say. And there's, you know, you'll hear instances of, you know, amazing players doing it in the right place. Listen, everything's valid, isn't it? In the right place. But if that's what you do all the time, then it makes its presence felt pretty quickly, I would say. And that's not what Pat Metheny's doing and players like that, I don't think. Generally speaking, what you might hear with someone like Metheny is a slightly more subtle version of the same thing, and that is, you take a little portion of something. So say my idea is, alright, so that's the phrase. I might just take a little bit of that, and I might say, just that little bit, right? Right. Now, instead of maybe even playing the whole bit of it, so say we just, we freeze on this part for a second. Little 4-note phrase, descending kind of like E minor over A minor. So E minor triad, second of it. So if we sidestep this is kind of obvious. Okay, so what I might do, instead of playing all 4, is maybe make a kind of a 2-note fragment. So instead, and this will rhythmically displace it, and this is one of the things that makes this sound less obvious. So if I go, so my 4 becomes a 2. And this is something that's much more movable. So what I'd suggest you do is you take a phrase, so say you, whatever it is that you're playing, you know, at any point within any phrase, you can take little bits of what you play so there I took, to say the lick is, I might take that, just that little small section of the whole phrase, and then I can move it in and out of tonality by semitones. And you hear Metheny do those kind of ideas. Or that kind of sort of line cliche that you hear him playing a lot, which is amazing, you know, where the 3 and 7. So say I was playing over, I don't know, the same harmony. You might play. So that's inside, that's outside. Or any of these kind of little fragments. So to give you a real definitive thing to play really slowly, I'm going to play this non-sidestepped, and then I'm going to make it into this half and switch between the two. Now, and then of course then we can use the complete one, sidestepped. And it sounds like we're kind of playing around with the rhythm there, and that's much more effective than going, which sounds kind of corny, you know. The other approach, of course, is to keep whatever pattern you're playing moving. So, you know, players seem to like these kind of ideas; they work well. So I'm taking a pattern there. Now I'm a semitone higher, and the pattern's so guys like Osnoy do a lot of those kind of things where they'll take a sequence or a pattern and move in the middle of the pattern, so like as if the guitar's being sort of nudged, like so they move a semitone higher or lower. And he does it with Jimi Hendrix licks and the like, you know. So I'm hoping that that's kind of a little bit of a simple one. It's not going to sort of hurt your brain quite so much. You don't really need to think so much for that. So that's the next thing. Again, you know, apologies for jumping about so erratically, but I'm just trying to get through some of the questions as best as I can. Okay, so I've got a really interesting question from Paul about overplaying. Yeah, I'm doing okay for time. And the question was, you know, have you ever had a scenario when you're in a musical situation and you're kind of told to play less, you know? And this comes, of course, the greater, you know, level of facility that you develop as a player. We're always looking for a potential application of where to use that facility. You know, you've learned this new thing, or you're developing a certain sense of harmony in your playing. Like, I particularly like playing things that are quite outside, but I have to be aware of the fact that it doesn't fit on every musical situation. If you're playing big band swing or something, and I'm hitting them with, you know, my latest kind of Thelonious Monk whole tone outside I did, eyebrows will probably be raised, I would think. So what I've learned to do, and this is kind of like a pillar of things that I often say to students and people going into the industry, you know, at that point where it's like, okay, this is going to be my career, I try to advise them to have some musical means of expression where you can just play whatever you want. Sometimes, right? Not all the time. Because of course, you know, we also want to earn some money as well, and sometimes if you're going to play, you know, super experimental avant-garde improvisation that really is just amazing and you love it, you know, it could be something that you're just doing just for your own pleasure, you know. I mean, and that's not to say, of course, you can't make that work. Of course, you know, you can, and there are players that prove that. But nonetheless, you know, if you're in a scenario where you're doing that, you've got that pop gig or what have you, or you're doing like functions and things, then, you know, there's a certain sort of musical etiquette that comes with playing those styles in a particular way, and not displaying everything that you know about music every single time you play. But with that in mind, if there's certain things that you enjoy doing, you know, you like taking really long solos super loud, and you know, your hero's Frank Zappa and you want to play modal things for 40 minutes or whatever, or you know, you're really into Osnoy and you know, you want to explore how you can make the whole tone scale sound over 12-bar blues. Well, that's great, you know, if you have the opportunity to do that, but it may not necessarily happen on every gig. So what I do is I have a regular thing that I do, regular gig. Well, had a regular gig that I did do when there were such things as gigs. And the concept is anything goes. I can play absolutely anything. If we want to play the whole of Bitches Brew, we can do it if we want. If we want to play no tunes and just like improvise freely for 2 hours, we're allowed to do it. No one's going to stop me. And I find that means that I really enjoy the other disciplines of playing like within certain parameters, and the parameters are, you know, maybe a different thing, you know, just play the charts and hit the chords exactly as they are. Play really inside, play beautifully melodically using just the pentatonic scale, you know, that's a real challenge, I think. And it's a different thing. But I don't feel that frustration if, you know, for argument's sake, work is dictating that you've got to run at gigs where you don't get the chance to be the soloist, you don't get the chance to showcase all the things that you've been practicing. Because if you've not got an outcome for this, if you've not got like a place where you can use this stuff, it does beg, you know, it raises the question, doesn't it, of what are we practicing it for if there's no, like, if it doesn't have a home, so to speak. And I find that I have no shortage of players who want to do this kind of stuff, because generally speaking, You know, I might get amazing trumpet player who plays in, you know, like the BBC Big Band or whatever, where they have to play a particular way, you know, or they play in a super hip pop band or what have you, but they don't get to take any solos, and then they can come and play for next to no money with me on a Wednesday night somewhere in a pub in London, and we can play whatever the hell we like, you know, and it can be as out there as you want, or as loud as you want, or as quiet as you want. It could be anything, and that keeps me sane, I think. And then also I look forward to those gigs, but then I also look forward to the ones where you don't play like that, because you sort of feel like you've got you've fulfilled, you've touched that part of your musicality. So I guess it depends, you know. Some players, maybe they're very lucky, where, you know, what you see is what you get. You know, I sense that, you know, Angus Young plays like the way he plays all the time. You know, I'm not entirely sure that maybe, you know, he's actually secretly an amazing country guitar player on the side, and he plays in a country band every week, you know, like under an alias. He probably doesn't, you know. But then you have other guitar players, you know, who are interested in doing just freelance work. So it might be, you know, I'm working with an amazing swing singer, he's fantastic. I love playing with people like Asa Murphy, he's a genius. But that's a different type of music than I might play if I've got, like, you know, 335 around my neck and lots of distortion and wailing solos. They don't want to hear that when I'm playing with him, you know. They want me to play a particular way, like, you know, big band rhythm guitar and you know, and basic sort of traditional style jazz guitar, and it's beautiful. It's really great to do, and I don't feel any kind of sense of frustration thinking, why aren't I at the front blowing solos? I mean, don't get me wrong, I get my moments, but even that's in a different style. I did a show recently with Ace. It was amazing, doing Buddy Holly stuff, and I just went into it thinking, I'm going to play the stuff exactly like it is on the record, you know. Because they don't want to hear me playing altered scale over Buddy Holly tunes. It'd suck. It would sound really rubbish, you know? But that doesn't mean to say all of that vocabulary that I've developed is now wasted just because I'm doing a particular gig that doesn't use it. Man, listen to Michael Brecker play on Brothers in Arms. That's, like, he's, for me, the person that says you can go into these musical situations and still have dignity and integrity, because he would do that. You know, he would play with his own band where he throws the kitchen sink at, and you know, at everything. Anything goes, man. He can play whatever he likes and plays out, and is kind of you know, discordant at times, but then also beautifully resolute. But then, you know, that Dire Straits album is a case in point, yeah? Where he just plays, I can't remember the name of the tune, it's a beautiful tune, he just plays the melody, man. He plays it straight, and he takes a solo in it as well, and it's amazing. And when he was playing Graceland or whatever with Paul Simon, you know, he's not out there, you know, giving it Artie Shepp, you know, he's playing in a particular way. And I thought, well, if it's alright for Brecker, man, it's okay for me, you know? That you can do that and really thoroughly enjoy it as well, because the last thing anyone wants to see is the guitar player with a face on him at the back because he's not taking solos, you know, or some drummer who's playing double bass drum fills over, like, you know, flipping cover band tunes or whatever. Like, it's not cool, and rightly so. People will be annoyed if you do that, you know. It's sort of playing in an inappropriate way, you know. And I don't think there's anything kind of like you're selling yourself short by playing in an appropriate way. And nobody, I don't think, is ever going to complain by saying, "Oh, that guitar player, the stuff he plays is just so right. I wish he'd play stuff that's more wrong." You know, it doesn't. Yeah, but then there's a time and a place to go and, you know, to go and play like Osnoy if you want, you know, really twist the harmony. But then you've got to kind of sense when that's the right time. You know? So I'm hoping that maybe answers that question. It's certainly my, you know, my 2 pennies on it. I'm not by any means, by the way, professing that I'm the font of all wisdom, that you know, that my way is the right way. It's just the way that I experience it, and that's what keeps me going. You know, the fact that, you know, the variety of things, I'm really enjoying them. If you don't enjoy them, you know, do something else. You know, because you know, the playing part is meant to be the fun part, and I can take just as much enjoyment playing behind, you know, some amazing singers. I played another great singer, Thomas Lang, who's fantastic, and I don't take any solos. All the solos, and for good reason. You know, they go to the saxophone player. Paul Thomas takes pretty much every solo. I think. Yeah, I don't think I get one. But it's an absolute, you know, it's great, you know, because it's a different responsibility. You know, it's great to be, you know, the kind of the rhythmic anchor. And I've seen Borelli do it, man. Borelli's behind Babbitt Reinhardt, you know, and Babbitt's ruling the show, you know. It's because he's Django's son. It's like, Borelli's not going to kind of take over, you know. Anyway, so that's, hopefully that's that question. So yeah, just looking, as time's moving on, I maybe got, yeah, two very, 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 hopefully quick things, right? So the first one is to do with dynamics. Richie said this thing about dynamics, you know, touch, feel, and so on. So okay, how's about this for a game? I think I saw Stanley Jordan talking about this at one point, one of those master lick videos, right? And everyone's obsessed with the tapping thing, and he's obviously at this stage in his career is frustrated with the tapping thing, not meaning he's not doing it, but meaning that that's all everyone can see. And he comes out with some amazing advice, which I'm sure most people missed because they're just going, how do you do that thing with two hands? And he's going, well, what about using dynamics when you play and stuff like that? So he said this thing, and it really affected me. In fact, I had a gig that night after I watched this video, and I went out and played probably one of the best gigs I've played in years, you know, just because he'd planted this seed in my mind. And he said, you know, imagine everything you play could go from 1 to 10, with 1 being the quietest thing, you know, but it's barely audible, you know, that you can just about hear. And 10 being that, right? How much of that range, and of course, you know, I'm playing a jazz guitar through a pair of studio monitors, you know, the loudest it could be Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock, you know, we're talking this much. And he raised the question to the attendees. He said, you know, how much of that do you actually use when you play? And most players were kind of like between a 4 and a 6. You know, that's what they were saying. Most players, they're kind of like, this is where you play for the most part. Like, this is where you pick. And you can see it in players where they got wear marks in one spot on the guitar. And he said, well, how about trying to play from 1 to 10, you know, or gradients? So you can take a blues and start on a 1. We go to a 3. To a 1. Maybe I'll go to a 3. Go through the different gradients of numbers. Just keeping that in your mind, like as if you've got like a volume control built into your pick, so that you could even take the same lick. And how much of that do you actually use when you play? So try it. You know, just imagine taking a chorus. And this is something you can do practice. Go, okay, my objective here is to go from something. I'm doing this very quickly. This might take, you know, when practicing this, it might take 10 minutes to get from one to the other. And I find if you play with good musicians, they'll respond to that really quickly. Like they'll hear that and they'll be like, wow, something's changed in your playing, that you're playing with this level of degrees of attack. And if they've got any kind of ears and they're in any way group players, they'll respond to it. If they don't respond to it, you need to get into a different band, or find an opportunity to play with musicians that do sometimes, going back to the previous point. Because when everybody's really hearing that and playing off each other, it's a magical experience, you know. It's like a conversation where everyone's included, rather than like this where it's me talking to a camera, you know. When everyone has an equal kind of part to play in the dynamics, then that's a great thing. Although I would say when someone's soloing, it's usually their responsibility. So kind of like the Gary Burton's thing, I really like, where he says, you know, when you're playing a solo, 70% of your attention is on your solo, 30% on the rhythm section, or maybe 80-20. When you're the rhythm section, 80% of your attention should be on the solo, not on what you're doing, and you should be responding to that. And it's, you know, we've all had it, you know, when we play with musicians and they're just doing their own thing and not listening to you, and you know, the drummer and the bass player kind of go off on one, and completely just, it's like mutiny. They ignore the soloist, and it sucks. It really sucks, and it's not cool, and it will get you not chosen for gigs if you do it, in my experience. So there's certain players that I know who are great players, and I just try not to play with them if I can help it, because like they don't listen when you play. You know, they've kind of got a plan mapped out, and what the soloist does is irrelevant to them. Whereas the players that everyone wants to work with, they're the ones who've got, okay, they're hearing it this way at this moment in time, and they want to go in this direction, and I'm going to support that, you know, and go with them. And maybe what I need to do to support that is not do anything really, you know, or maybe it is to do a lot, and it depends, depending on the given time. And that's the joy of improvisation. You know, you can play the same song twice, and it's different each time because you've approached it from a different dynamic perspective. So I know I'm moving through that pretty quickly, but I'm hoping that there's some it's even just a little bit of wisdom in there that I can impart. So there's just, yeah, I'm going to try and deal with this one very, very quickly. Glenn was asking about composition. Like what are people thinking about, or what am I thinking about? I guess I can really speak for myself. So I'm a goal based. So I'm not one of those musicians that just has endless songs just floating around in their head and they just flow out of them without any kind of, like, you know, without any kind of involvement in the process. For me, I have to work at it, and that means I have to dedicate time to it. So that's what I do. I dedicate time. I say, okay, this next hour I'm going to just work on finishing the A section to a particular tune. I don't generally just sort of wake up in the morning and go, it's finished, you know. And it doesn't happen like that for me. Maybe it does for Paul McCartney, I'm sure it does. But I have to kind of work at it. So and there is inspiration comes from any location, but I set aside time. But what I do in the moments where things do hit me is I record everything on my phone. I've got hundreds of voice notes, and it could just be a chord voicing. This started all off like that. I had this idea where I recently discovered, like, or just kind of thought about contrary motion. I thought, okay, so if you can have this happening in harmonic minor, E and F, then you could potentially have E to F with the E staying in the bass, so like an F over E. But then I could also have an E over F. So that move has formed the basis of a piece, and then I expanded upon it, you know, to then work on new ideas where the harmony goes down. So in this case I played an E chord with a D in the bass to a D chord with an E in the bass. I think I might have come from actually listening to some Borelli thing where he does those things where he'll play a chord that's going up and a bass line that's going down. But anyway, from that one chord voicing has now come a whole piece of music. Because then I worked at it, I thought, okay, that could be used as a kind of a chordal riff, and then where does it go next? And sometimes it's in sections. So when it does come to time to have to write, I just go to the voice notes folder on this computer to my left, and there's hundreds of these little fragments, and I go through them periodically and say, is any of this any good? Right, and most of them I've forgotten. I go, I don't even know what this is, and I give them obscure titles, you know, like, you know, contrary motion triads or whatever that might have been called. And then I try and cobble it together and hear a melody that goes over it. Sometimes the melody comes first. But the one thing I've found is, because I'm deadline driven, if you give me open amounts of time to do something that doesn't get done, is I'll often do things like, and the last album was done entirely this way, I'd book the rhythm section for sessions when the tunes were not finished, nowhere near finished. But I give myself enough time. I go, okay, I'm going to book a bass player and a drummer and a rhythm guitar player in this instance. And the studio session is booked for 2 weeks. 2 weeks on Wednesday. And then I'd have a week of kind of putting it off, and then a week of going, right, they're going to turn up and expect to see stuff, you know, thrust in front of them on music stands. And that polarizes me into getting it together. I'm kind of doing it at the moment. I've set myself a little deadline with Mark Rose, who's playing bass on this next project. And one deadline's rapidly approaching, actually, so I'm going to be recording some stuff tomorrow. They're written, the pieces are written, I've just got to record them. So yeah, like forcing myself to do stuff to a certain extent, and then also factoring in the time. Like, so I put aside time to compose, like I would put aside time to practice technique or to practice, you know, repertoire to learn for other people's gigs. I should put aside time for composition as well. And again, even then, I set myself a goal, you know, like, you know, I'm going to get the A section finished, you know, and I notate it. And the beauty of notating it is because I find if I don't notate things, then I can end up never making a decision. One of the problems you get, the more you know about stuff, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, I've kind of, again, any kind of encyclopedic knowledge of anything, but, you know, the more things you learn, the more options you have. So therefore, the more opportunity you have for procrastination and not having anything fixed. Because composition is not about knowing all the options. Composition is about making decisions. That's exactly what it's based on. I know people who know about half a dozen chords who've written more songs than people who know all the scales and all the chords in every inversion. You know, there's players who know all that stuff and never written anything. You know, whereas you can show some guitar players G, C, and D, and they come back 2 days later with 3 songs written. So there is a thing about making decisions, and I find notating makes me make decisions because I have to either click it into Sibelius or usually write it out on a score and then convert it later on. And then that's when the decisions get made. Do I go to a C minor here, or does it go to a whatever that goes to? Do I use this rhythm or that rhythm? They're both cool. I need to make a choice because I can't write them both down. And it's making choices that gets things done, I think. Yeah, because, you know, when you hit a crossroads and you can't make the decision, that's when you end up with something unfinished. And the people who seem to be the most productive are the ones who can be the most decisive. And that's why partnerships work great sometimes, because you might find someone's great with ideas, but they can't make the choice, whereas someone else can go, okay, play me this one, play me that one, that's the best one. And they're completely like secure in their choices. They don't have to doubt, you know, there may be some of us, you know, myself, I can suffer with that sometimes, where you have a doubt and you think, is this the best one or that one? You don't get anything done. I've learned to trust my instincts now, you know, and just go, just do it, get it done. You can always change your mind later on. So if I do make a decision and then something's just not sitting right, you think, well, maybe that would be better if I did this instead, then that's okay. Unless you do what I do and finish the tunes 2 days before and it's too late, and then you just learn to deal with what you've got, you know. But hopefully, you know, every experience we get a little bit more, we refine the process and we find something that works, you know. So just I've got time to maybe just look at one very, very quick thing, if I may. And then, I'm sorry, because I've got loads of questions this week, which is great. Please keep them coming, and I will endeavour to try my best to fit them all in, if I can, over the coming weeks. We'll keep this going if there seems to be a demand for it, which is really great. It's really, yeah, I'm feeling the love. It's great. I'm feeling that this is something that we want. So, okay. So the question was from James. He's talking about voice leading. So I'm going to keep this one. Right, nice. I wonder if you can all hear that dog barking out the back. Voice leading through, and he was asking about 2-5-1s. Voice leading is about trying to find ways for the notes to move in the smoothest possible way when the harmony moves, and this is how you can use those kind of crunchy notes in a way that they don't sound funny or wrong. So I remember the first time I learned, you know, these type of chords that you know, this, thinking, man, when's that? What Hendrix groove's got that chord in it, you know, or this? I'm thinking they're beautiful chords, but they don't really make sense on their own. It's like certain words. If you just take the word on its own, it just doesn't make any sense. So when it's put into context, that it actually makes sense. And the way to put these into context is to try and find effective voice leading. So, for example, if I play D minor, it does this. And I go to a C major that does this. I'm hoping that you can hear. I'm doing this on the top note here, although this can also happen in the inner voices as well, but just because I want to do this kind of 5-minute whistle-stop tour of voice leader. So, some bright sparks, you know, realised I can go, like Barker, one of those guys, he did everything, didn't he? Yeah, Barker did everything first. So what I can do is I can heighten the tension, so D minor, kind of like a stepping stone, C major, like a stepping stone. The G7 could be a form of tension, so I go D minor, G7 with a sharp 5. Now hopefully you're all hearing that, and I can go the opposite way. And you can hear line. So that line I went, so mimicked. That I played in the chords. So then I played like a sharp 5, and it hopefully made perfect sense. It didn't stand out by itself. Likewise, if I play a flat 9, well, it's almost dissonant, but if I go, hopefully these things make sense. Now there's a way of doing this where all 12 notes are possible. So I'm going to play this really slowly. I'm going to maybe leave this with you as a task to see how you get on. So D minor with a D, G7 with a, I guess it would be, actually with a C. First one, D minor with a C, forgive me. Then G7 with a D flat, gets a flat 5. C major with a D on the top. So there's the flat 5. Mimic this with lines as well, and then we have the one I just played, and you know, any C chord, doesn't have to be that one, it could be whatever you want it to be. Okay, and then I'm going to do this is kind of an unusual one. It's a McCoy Tyner type thing, Schofield, and all those guys. So that was D minor. 7, it's in there, but I'll just play chromatically, and then flat 9, and then one more, the D minor, now what that was there was every note, that's all 12. D, so C, D flat, D, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat, B, A, B flat, B. 12 notes, and everything that I play in chords can be mimicked with lines. So this is where this altered scale, the idea you can play sharp 5, flat 9, raised 9 come from. You know, I'm pretty sure Billie Holiday didn't know what an altered scale was, but you could hear, you could hear that, you know, so you can hear that, and you can hear those notes. So the singers that I play with who sound beautiful and use these notes, and they don't know what they are in that way, because they just hear it as they can hear them as lines, and they make sense. So every note, that's all 12 notes there over a 2, 5, 1, and we can do similar things against minor and against all kinds of functional chord progressions. But I'm hoping that that might be something for you to explore. You can do the same thing going down as well. The same, you know, look for the same thing going down. The principal ones that we're looking for are the gap between the root and the tonic. You know, so the C, the root and the second, sorry, and also between the second and the third. This is from the C chord I'm talking about, you know, so it's the root of D, but it's the second of C, and there's the raised second, if you like, and then that's the minor third, and then the other two are to the 5, the raised 5 of C, that is, on the 6, and that can go the other way, and between the 6 and the 7. Yeah, so I'm hoping that there's something we can pick from that. Apologies, there's a couple of questions there I didn't get around to, but yeah, some of these ideas are quite big topics. I'm sure we can appreciate, but they're on the list for next time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post these videos up onto YouTube as well. So over a period of time, I'm hoping there'll be kind of like a repository of useful ideas that you guys can draw from. If you've enjoyed it, please leave nice comments. Likes are always great. But you know, I'm going to keep doing it. Assuming that there's a demand for it, which I'm hoping that there is, you're going to see me here, certainly for the period of lockdown. Yeah, this time next Sunday. So thank you so much for your attention and me babbling on. Take care of yourself, stay safe, try and enjoy the sunshine as much as you can, because I have a feeling that by the time lockdown's over, it's going to be the sunshine's going to have gone. But so yeah, let's try and make the best of what is a very uncertain situation. Much love, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.